Now word out, bitch. You better stop slinging that shit on my streets, yo. We don't want it anymore. Hey, yo, Jay, you catching this?
Rolling.
This, Manny, for fuck's
The
sake!
streets have spoken. Now leave my people alone. Yo, Nico, what are you doing here?
Described by Johnny Klebitz as the meanest bitch in Bohan, Elizabeta Torres is another one of those characters who play only a minor role in the grand scheme of things in Grand Theft Auto 4's main story. From Nico's perspective, she was an opportunity, someone who can help him get back on his feet through work, money, and connections. After he and Roman were just run out of broker, losing the cab business, the apartment, and any sense of peace they once had while staying under the radar in a brand new country, Elizabeta offered a much-needed path forward. And that path opens directly to them thanks to Elizabeta's childhood connection to Roman's girlfriend, Mallory. She's an ally who immediately gives Nico a chance to prove himself. And when contrasted with Manny, a man so desperate for the spotlight that he irritates Nico to no end, Elizabeta feels all the more like a welcoming partner. But of course, that very quality can make her seem dull to her true power, ruthlessness, and total reach. Traits that shine far more clearly in the Lost and Damned DLC, much like Ray Pacino's character does. But it's through that DLC we witness Elizabeta become even more involved in drug trafficking, as Johnny escorts a drug mule into Liberty City. We also learn at just 14 years old, a man once tried to take advantage of her, resulting in, as she says, her feeding him his balls. An act that would go on to earn her a fearsome reputation, and from that moment forward, on her home island of Puerto Rico, no man ever dared try her again. It was a life-altering event that would forever fuel her aggressive tendencies and drive to never be controlled again. And as we'll see when we dive into her criminal records, she even repeats the same pattern in a vague case involving a poor minor in the future.
I came up from a rough background. Man tried to turn me out. When I was 14 years old, when I ended that fucker. I got a reputation in PR. No man touched me after that.
Born circa 1977, Elizabeta is 31 years old during the events of Grand Theft Auto 4. That is the exact same age as Ray Pacino. Unlike Ray though, Elizabeta's story actually begins on the island of Puerto Rico where she was born. This is despite her LCPD criminal record stating she was born in South Bohan. Now, this is actually a discrepancy I want to address up front because as per her own story to Johnny about the man in Puerto Rico when she was just 14 years old, 14 years of age for her would be in 1991. Which is the exact same year she would be first arrested in Liberty City on charges of possession-controlled substance, crack cocaine. Funny enough, Dwayne Forge would be arrested this exact same year with the exact same charge. Now, Dwayne wouldn't rise to the height of his power for another year or so, but even he said that as his product became pure, providing a better and better high, no one else could compete with him. And we do know that he eventually would expand into Bohan, even taking over the Triangle Strip Club at some point in time. While we're speaking about Dwayne, I do also want to point this out. Playboy X in the main game of Grand Theft Auto 4 already knew Elizabeta when we first meet him, and he even seemed to have a somewhat stern reaction when Nico asked whether Elizabeta often got him to do things for her.
Does Elizabeta get you to do stuff like this often?
Elizabeta don't get me to do shit. I just like to keep an eye on things. There ain't a deal in this town I don't know about. I own this city, for reals.
So this leaves quite a few questions open. Did Elizabeta learn directly from Dwayne? Did she work with him and gain insight into the demand and market for crack cocaine within this part of Liberty City? Did she and Playboy work as underlings for him, even if she wasn't directly involved as Playboy might have been? To be fair, it's never explicitly stated as much, and it's very much speculation on the surface because, well, she seems to have a firm grip on her own doings and her own empire, essentially. By 2008, she owns her own cocaine empire and has strong connections all the way back to Puerto Rico. But her age, the timing of her arrests, and the fact that they occurred in an entirely new foreign region for her make it hard to ignore. Her case also matches Playboy's 1999 arrest record almost exactly, while Dwayne's charge included the additional tag of intent to sell, suggesting she was caught with the drug on her rather than identified as a distributor or a street-level seller. And who knows, maybe even if she was involved at that lower level, similar to Playboy, it could have been part of a legal move to just disregard her and help build a stronger case against the main catch. Dwayne. Whatever the case, it's a very intriguing story because I've always wondered how these two powers might have worked or clashed together, since their products and territories heavily overlap, and Elizabeta herself appears to be extremely aggressive. So to me, the idea that she was young and experienced and learning from Dwayne early on would not surprisingly explain quite a bit. Another piece of information that's missing is exactly when she meets Mallory. The best thing we can go off of here is Mallory's own criminal record, which was a huge surprise to me as I never expected she'd have any run-ins with the law. But I do also want to point out that personally, I think her having a record and the notes within it go on to provide a useful insight into the LCPD and how closely they keep an eye on people they already have their sights on, which in this case would actually be Elizabeta and the closest people to her. Still, when we look at Mallory's records, she's a few years younger than Elizabeta, and that her actual birthplace is in Puerto Rico. So it is possible that when Elizabeta immigrated to the mainland US, most likely with her parents or even possibly by herself, she had already known Mallory from their earliest days in Puerto Rico together. From there, the two of them eventually settling down in Bohan makes sense considering Bohan's strong Hispanic heritage that is closely linked to Manny Escuela, who is also Puerto Rican. Unlike the two of them, he was born here in South Bohan. So it builds this close proximity explanation for how all three of them would go on to meet each other. As in the main story of the game, we never get that full explanation of how all three of them know one another beyond Mallory simply being the connection between Manny and Elizabeta. Manny is overly protective and caring toward Mallory, making sure Roman has the right intentions to marry her and make an honest woman out of her, as per his close childhood friendship with her. Elizabeta, meanwhile, operates as a more aggressive, business-minded woman who has no delusions about who she is or what she wants. Truthfully, I've thrown out a lot of information about LCPD criminal records in this video alone, and I understand that's quite a lot. But Elizabeta weirdly has some of the most interesting information within her files that explains more about her character than the grand total of 8 missions we see her across the main game and the DLC. Or to put so more accurately, complements it. Because diving back into her files, at 17 years old in 1996, she would be arrested for possession of heroin. Heroin is, as she says, something she refuses to go near, which is why she sends Nico and Playboy to oversee the attempted selling of the Triad's heroin the Lost had stolen from the Angels of Death, which in turn puts heavy law enforcement scrutiny on the Lost, Elizabeta, and to a less intense degree, Nico, since that whole deal was a police sting operation. The question of law enforcement is a different path than what I was getting at here though. What I was really pointing to is this. Let's not forget that Manny was a heroin addict at some point in time, before eventually going on to change his life around and attempting to become a community activist and leader. It's yet another questionable part of Elizabeta's criminal history, and it raises even more questions. I wonder if heroin became a catalyst of sorts, the part of Manny's life that would drag him further and further down a darker path before eventually turning him into what we see in the game. That pacifist figure who would seek to eradicate the kind of big players Elizabeta would eventually become herself. And then for her, seeing the hold heroin had and the strong negative effect it left on someone who could have become a genuine close friend may have created, if not a full inversion to it, then at the very least a personal qualm about getting involved with it and personally pushing the same drug she had a bad experience with because of Manny's addiction. Well, that soft spot does seem odd considering she does go on to eventually kill him, but her initial reaction before headshotting him and his cameraman is anything but hostile. She doesn't react angrily immediately, but instead seems confused, and only becomes dangerous once she's suddenly put on camera after doing a few lines of coke while panicking about her own bodyguard turning states, everyone leaving her, and the police cracking down. It just wasn't a good time to place that spotlight on her while she was having that breakdown. But it all still fits as yet another layer of complexity in how she might have viewed heroin and the people tied to it. A morally gray area, if you will, that fits very well with Rockstar's usual writing for characters. Apart from that heroin-related arrest, her record shows a growing pattern of expansion from crack cocaine to heroin and an escalation in violence that culminates in a 2001 charge that's not only vague, but echoes her own experience at 14 years old, at least to some extent. Here she was charged with criminal sexual assault on a minor. Since she was exposed to that brutal side of the world at such a young age, it could be read as the thematic connection between her own traumatic experiences and the repetition of that same dynamic of power and exploitation. Although it doesn't say she was involved in prostitution or directly involved in the sense of being an actual pimp, What we may be able to infer is something that remains prevalent throughout much of her on-screen presence and is closely tied to her own childhood experience that we've been constantly referring to, being taken advantage of by an older man.
I'm the big boss. People gonna love you, but they're gonna hate you even more, right? They're gonna hate you because you're a woman in this macho fucking world. They're gonna hate you because you're from the island. Stupid people think Latinos ain't worth shit in this town.
Throughout Elizabeta's time working with Johnny and Nico, she has moments where her feelings slip through. She shares that she is the big boss and says people will love you and they will hate you because you're a woman and because you're Latina. In the same context, she continues by stating that this is a man's world. All of this not only hints at the pain and hardships that she has endured, but also the possible prejudices that she continues to face because she's a woman and because of her ethnic background. It does help explain her aggression and the reason behind it without needing to spell out so much more. Since she also mentions that she's been married 3 times, it hasn't pushed her far enough to reject getting sexually involved with men, but it may still influence her professional direction and maybe even her tactics. The first time we meet her through Johnny, he jokingly backs away, saying he's afraid she'll stick a knife in his back while giving him a kiss.
Liz Torres, the meanest bitch in Bohan.
Oh, come here, sweetie.
Shit, I'd let you kiss me, but I'm afraid you'd stick a knife in my back while I was doing it.
You wouldn't be the first man I tried that trick on, sweetie.
Yeah, I heard the stories.
She has this fierce reputation and plenty of stories about her tendencies to both deal with problems and use her womanly charm to her advantage, a reputation that precedes her. We get to see these two aspects of her character very clearly through the time we spend mostly with Johnny, who sees a more vulnerable and aggressive side of her. This is primarily shown through the drug mule, Martha. Martha's situation provides further explanation into Elizabeta's business operations and even her personal relationships, so let's begin with the way she does business and seeks enforcers, because that is primarily Johnny and Nico's jobs. Now, unlike Jimmy Pecorino, for example, I don't see Elizabeta as someone who is necessarily as weak or taken as a joke as he is. Much of her operation appears to be more spot on, with a firm understanding of what she's doing. A small example of that is her parties. As she says, surround yourself with cocaine and the assholes follow. Assholes she doesn't refer to in a loving sense, but as people you have around to keep a close eye on or to be actively involved within your product. That idea is reinforced through her wanting to clean up her house after these assholes leave, so that way she can make sure her house is clean enough and presentable for when Marta arrives. So for the enforcers, I think they're more business moves rather than desperation or an inability to find people that are just as capable. Through Nico, she has someone who is new and unknown with no ties to any existing organization, while through Johnny, she has his affiliation to the Lost, but more importantly, she has the dependency she can place on Johnny, specifically using him and the weird friendship between him and Melk to bring the Uptown Riders into her dealings. It's through these moves and affiliations that do go on to dissipate the heat of law enforcement, as I personally believe that out of everyone involved in the initial heroin deal, she was the one being watched and inadvertently got everyone else under police scrutiny, but I also think it was the best out of an incredibly bad situation. Apart from Marta and her doorman Andreas, there's no other associate we see her involved in. So I don't want to give the impression of her being all-powerful or having a branch of men similar to what Ray Pacino apparently had, and since we see her during what is basically her own downfall, it may have been smarter to have those hypothetical people doing this for her, lessening the ties of criminal activity that can be traced back to her directly, and more so either fall on Nico, who's a ghost, or Johnny, who would be looked at as a very active member of the Lost. With Martha, however, I wonder if there was some other safety nets involved with her. For extra context, Martha's a drug mule from Puerto Rico who swallowed a handful of condoms filled with cocaine. She was meant to go from the island to here in Liberty City trafficking the drugs, and then Elizabeta sends Johnny to go pick her up from the airport and be that escort back to her home. Now, before Johnny is sent, Elizabeta's on the phone with who I'm guessing is Martha, because of how she tells her to basically walk through customs.
No, all you gotta do is walk through customs and you home free. Está bien. Yeah, I'll see you soon. Hey, don't worry about my friend Johnny, huh? He's ugly, but he don't bite.
During this whole phone call, Elizabeta speaks English to Martha. Yet when Martha is picked up by Johnny, she speaks to him in only Spanish.
Me, you go Liz Torres' place. Yes? Okay? You, Marta, you first time in Liberty City?
Liberty City, swingers, baseball, la estatua de felicidad, las mujeres feas.
los políticos lascivos, la delincuencia armada, la ciudad más ensimismada del mundo. Sí, Liberty City.
Liberty City. Very good. You learn good. I mean, you're learning very well.
Usted no es exactamente lo que esperaba, señor Johnny. ¿Y ahora vamos al hotel de 5 estrellas?
Me no habla mucho Spanish, lady.
Necesita una ducha después de esta bienvenida tan perra. Uf, estoy mareada. ¿Tiene idea de cuántos condones llenos de perico hay en mi intestino delgado? Espero que nada se haya roto.
Elizabeta came from Puerto Rico herself, so she should know that language very well. And she does use a few words here and there, and even if we gave her the benefit of the doubt and said, well, she was speaking to a translator, it still wouldn't make all that much sense. It'd be much more logical if they had a contingency plan in place here. If Martha was stopped by anyone, she was to then pretend she didn't speak English, respond only in Spanish, making it easier to deny, or be busted as an active drug mule. And we see her do that as when she is stopped by an FIB agent at the airport. Her job might have been to never let anyone know. English is at the very least something she can't understand without express permission from Elizabeta, or even her own discretion, as the next time we see her, she's in the kitchen cooking and she asks Johnny if he wants to eat. Managing a drug mule adds even more credibility to Elizabeta's reach. Having that contingency plan in place, if it's real, would also be a major bonus. The other part is her protective nature over Martha, because she appears to react pretty strongly when Johnny suggests taking Martha away for a short period of time, keeping an eye on her and keeping her safe until the police heat dies down off of Elizabeta. Could it be personal ties to Martha or Elizabeta's broader interest in women? Possibly as drug mules or additional associates she can bring into her operation? In her LCPD record, she is noted as frequenting female gyms. Perhaps those are grounds of recruitment or an attempt to get women specifically hooked on her cocaine. Whatever the case, we can't ignore the final elements of what is quite possibly one of the more terrifying aspects about her. That is, for the most part, pretty much breezed over in the game. Her ties to a doctor who helps get rid of dead bodies by selling off their parts on the black market. To this day, what happened to Manny is ultimately left a mystery beyond Nico and Elizabeta, who of course know Elizabeta shot him and his cameraman in the head, stowed them in the trunk of Elizabeta's car, and then had Nico drive their dead bodies to a doctor out in Broker. Ignoring his records stating he is missing, in the Ballad of Gay Tony DLC, he is mentioned as precisely that, someone who just disappeared, allowing the doorman at Hercules to swoop in and take the television slot Manny would have received had he not been killed or gone missing.
Really need you to speak to Tony.
I did, and you can't move to Masonite.
No, man, not that. Not that. Guess what? I'm gonna be famous. Seriously.
So?
So, are you insane, man? What else matters? The production company here, man, belongs to one of the guys. They are gonna make a show about me. Me. I mean, they were gonna make one about this Puerto Rican guy in Bohan, but he disappeared. Now, they're gonna make a show about me.
This is continuity that really wasn't necessary, but I absolutely love that callback. Not only does it tie in a small character Nico could barely stand, it also recalls him and shows the wider implications of someone dying or going missing, making the world feel much more cohesive as a result. And that move in turn increases the impact of Elizabeta. The whole concept of selling dead bodies in order to get rid of them is one of the two darkest moments in Grand Theft Auto 4's story. The other is literally unplugging Anthony off of life support while watching him convulse. These two are things I don't ever see Rockstar bringing back in a mainstream Grand Theft Auto game, but who knows, maybe they will, and with it they'll increase the complexity and overall activity of the underground market that this doctor exists and appears to be a part of. All in all, Elizabeta is one of those characters you meet early in the story who already has all the walls closing in on her. And for those of you who don't know, when she is arrested, as the game progresses, her trial goes on to take place, with a verdict ending having her receive 300 years in prison, 10 years per cocaine distribution charge that she's hit with. A new record for the criminal justice system of Liberty City.